Dr. Ameen is a husband, father, son, educator, and author. He views life as a test that was never meant to be easy. Life is an ongoing struggle that strengthens the wise man or woman to be able to overcome and endure all life's challenges. Dr. Ameen also sees education as the vehicle that allows all who take advantage of it to fully contribute to the betterment of society. And again, thank you, Ameen, for Dr. Ameen for being here.
Thank you.
All right, first question about your, how you got here to be the great author that you are. What was your favorite author growing up?
So, first, before I tell you my favorite author, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I was so scared that when I came here that it would just be me and maybe two other students, so I appreciate you coming out today. Growing up, my favorite author was probably James Baldwin, and then followed closely by Malcolm X.
What is a recurring motif your book is centered around?
So my book, Odyssey, A Road Less Traveled, talks about first my struggles growing up, both socially and academically in Philadelphia. I always like to tell my students that when I was in school, especially high school, I was a horrible student, horrible. And it took me 4 years in order to get my life together. I was an immature young man that I had to really experience life in order for me to grow and to become the person that I am today. But the book itself centers around my early childhood growing up in Philadelphia, struggles in both middle and high school, and then how I was able to find redemption and find my purpose through a historically black college, Virginia State University.
What inspired you to write this book?
The reason I wrote the book is, first, I wanted to give back to my university. They had given so much to me. I didn't want to wait until I was too old to tell the story about what it means to be at a majority African-American school. I grew up in a very mixed environment. I wasn't around a lot of African-Americans. I didn't have a really good sense of my culture. And when I went to Virginia State, it gave me a sense of who I was as a man and as an African-American man in this American society. So I wanted to write the book to give back to the school, to let them know that they had changed the course of my life forever.
What was the best thing about writing this book?
I think the best thing was just reflecting back on some of the memories that I had in college. I tell my students that when I went to college, I didn't know how to cook, I didn't know how to wash clothes, I didn't know how to pay bills, I didn't know how to do too much of anything. And my first week in college, and I write about this in the book, I didn't know how to wash clothes, so I decided to put all of my clothes in together, the whites, the colors, and everything, and my clothes came out pink. And I'm from Philadelphia, and I went to school in Virginia, and I called home and I told my mother that all of my clothes were pink, and she said, "I can't help you, you're just gonna have to walk around campus like that." And I walked around with pink clothes for probably about 2.5 weeks.
So, do you think it's when you were brought up and your experience at an HBCU, which sort of like changed you? Like, how do you feel like, or rather, if you went to a different school and where you went, would have like turned out differently?
I would have. If I didn't go to a small school, so when you're thinking about going to colleges now, you really need to look at your own personality. Would you fit better at a large state school or a small private school? With me, I needed to be in a small private school. My school was only a little over 3,000 students. It was just a little larger than Wheaton, and my class sizes were roughly around 20, 25 students. If I would have gone to a large state school, I would have just been lost. I needed that one-on-one attention, so that's one of the reasons that I picked Virginia State as opposed to going to a larger state school in Pennsylvania.
What challenges did you have writing this book?
I guess the biggest challenge I had in writing the book is that, like a lot of students, I'm a procrastinator. So it took me 15 years to write this book. And the only reason it took that long is every time I sat down to write it, I kept thinking of excuses on other things I needed to do. And what prompted me at the very end to finish it is that one of my best friends, who's like 20 years younger than me, he wrote a book, and I just felt embarrassed that I started on mine and never finished it, and that gave me the impetus to decide to finish the book. And after I started writing and focused on it, it probably took me about 4 months.
What was your writing schedule like, or work schedule like when you were writing?
So once I stopped procrastinating, my work schedule was I would wake up in the morning, probably about 5 o'clock, and I would spend 2 hours writing. Then I would go along with my day, and then I would spend between 2 and 3 hours in the evening before I went to bed to write. And I did that for probably that 4-month process until I was finished.
Are you planning on writing another book?
So I am planning on writing another book. I've started on the book. I want to write a book about fatherhood, and especially African American fatherhood. A lot of times black fathers tend to get a bum rap on not being really responsible, maybe leaving their children, not being good husbands and fathers. So I want to write a book about the positive aspects of being a father, and how, you know, once males are engaged in the lives of their children, that it changes who they become as a person. And so that's what I'm going to focus on this summer and hopefully not procrastinate on.
Has your family in any way shaped the way you've written your book?
So my parents divorced when I was about 16. So probably the biggest influence in my life is my mother. So a lot of the things that I contribute to my success, besides going to a historically black college, is focused on my mother. When I was going through my struggles academically and socially, she was one of the few people who never gave up on me. And so when I was writing the book, I have many of the chapters are dedicated to her, and, you know, not giving up on me, and always realizing that I was better than I thought I was, and I have to give her credit for that.
What advice do you have to others pertaining to like being a better writer?
All right, so I try to tell, since I'm an English teacher, I try to tell my students this all the time. The only way you become a better writer is to write. There's no shortcuts whatsoever. And one of the greatest skills that you can have is the ability to write, and not just write, but write well. And a good way to do that is to read good literature, to see how people who write well, how they formulate paragraphs and sentence structure, how they develop a story. And once you learn that, that's going to put you head and shoulders above many of your peers who don't like to read and don't like to write. And just on a side note, for the individuals who are thinking about going to college, one of the greatest advantages that you will have in college is the advantage of knowing how to write well. Because just about every class that you take will require you to do a lot of writing. Not just your English class, not just the history class. So the more that you learn the gift of writing, the better you will be personally and also as a student.
All right, so when you were younger and like reflecting on like where you are now, could you ever see yourself doing something else?
Absolutely. I never wanted to be a teacher. That was the last thing in my mind. And the reason I didn't want to be a teacher is because I would never want a teacher to have to put up with a student like me. I knew how I was in the classroom. I knew that I was a pain. I knew I was that type of student that the teacher they would see me walking in the classroom door and just, they prayed that I would stay home that day. But I decided to come. I wouldn't stop talking. I would bother other people. And many of my teachers stuck by me and didn't give up on me. And I know I just plucked their last nerve. And I didn't want to stand in front of a class and have students like that. But now it's a joy. I enjoy doing that because it's a challenge every day to see a student at the very beginning of the school year, and then if you're blessed to be with them for the whole year, you see from August to June how they become totally different people and they grow up, and I just like that process.
In the beginning you said James Baldwin was your favorite author. Is there any books of his that really stood out to you?
So he has they made a movie out of one of his novels called Beale Street. If you get a chance to see that, it's an excellent movie. Probably my favorite book by James Baldwin is The Fire Next Time. And they're thinking about turning that into a movie also. But I love individuals who have a great command of the English language and they know how to put a story together and it's entertaining. Because I didn't always like to read, so in order for a book to really engage me, the writer has to have relevant material and weave a story that keeps my interest from the beginning to the end, and James Baldwin does that for me.
Are there any authors or other books you recommend to the audience to check out?
There are quite a few. I'm a big fan of Charlemagne the God. If any of you have heard him, he has a show, The Breakfast Club, and he never graduated from high school. He never went to college, but he is a student of the English language, and he has 2 books. Can't think of the names right offhand, but if you put up Charlemagne the God, you will see 2 books that he has about growing up in South Carolina, and then African-American perspective on growing up with depression. Both of those books are excellent if you get a chance to read them.
What do you want your readers to take away from reading your book?
So I think the biggest thing I would like people to take away from my book is that no matter where you start out at in life, that doesn't have to be who you become as you grow older. If people judge me for the person that I was when I was 15 years old, they would have given up on me a long time ago. The person that you see now is a cleaned up, polished version of who I was as a young man. And always remember that no matter what mistakes that you make in life, that it's never too late to make a change. But in order to make a change, you have to understand what you've done wrong, what you need to do right, and then be as consistent as possible to make sure that it's not just a dream of yours that a lot of people have, but it's a goal. And the biggest difference between a dream and a goal is that a dream is just something you imagine, but a goal is something that you put forth an effort with and then you're consistent about it.
What was the most surprising thing you learned in writing your book?
Probably that at a fairly young age that I had done so much. One thing that, when I mentioned earlier, I never wanted to be a teacher. When I graduated from college, I wanted to be a screenwriter. So for like 4 years, I wrote plays and screenplays for the movies, and I would travel back and forth from New York to California. And I really thought that I was going to be the next Spike Lee. He was my hero at the time. And then what happened is that after 3 years, my best friend, I asked him to be honest, how come I'm not selling any of my scripts? How come I'm not as successful as I want to be? And he said, because you suck. He said that you're not that good. And sometimes you need friends who are brutally honest with you to say, you know, what other people may be afraid to say. So once he said that, then I had the challenge, and the challenge was either to get better at my craft or decide to do something else. And I didn't have a love for it like I thought I did, so I became a substitute teacher to make ends meet. And once I got in front of kids in the class, I was hooked. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Are there any, could you just describe for us, any works you did as a screenwriter?
So the reason I can't describe any works I did as a screenwriter is because I didn't sell any. But I had 2 plays that I wrote about my experience growing up in Philadelphia. I grew up my family was the first African American family that was on a street, a small street in Philadelphia. So I wrote about the experience of being the only African American in a community, and how it was growing up with 99% of my friends being non-African American. It was one of the best experiences of my life, being the other, being a minority in a large setting, because I learned that at the end of the day, people are people. And when you learn to respect people for who they are and not their skin color, it helps you to grow as a person. So I wrote some plays about that, but I think I was the only one that liked that idea.
Did you take any shortcuts while you were writing your book?
Not really. Because I realized that the process was going to be long. I think initially, since I'd never written a book before, I thought the process would be fairly simple. I would sit down, I would take time to develop what my story would look like, get a word processor, write everything down, find a publisher, find an editor, and then submit my work. And then once I started to write, and then I had writer's block, and then life happened, and I had a lot of distractions, and then I had to find someone to edit my work, and that took a long time, and then to find a publisher to publish it. What happened was that I went to a lot of major publishers to publish my work, and because I was a first-time writer, author, and they didn't know me and I didn't have name recognition, nobody picked up my book. So what I had to do, I had to self-publish. So I had to learn what it was like to publish a book, to do my own advertisement, and all of those things were something I didn't expect, so I didn't take any shortcuts.
Would you, in your time at Wheaton, have you ever had students come and read your book or mention that you're an author?
So I purposely, at the back of my classroom, have a big poster of my book. So a lot of kids, they don't look in the back of the class, and then every now and then I'll get one of the students to say, "Isn't that your name?" And then they'll ask me about the poster, and then I'll tell them, "Yeah, I wrote a book." And I think I've given a couple of them out, but most will just ask about it. I want them to get past the asking phase and start to actually read. That would be nice.
Well, since you're a writer and a successful writer, would you help others write their books, or would you ever in the future mentor students into writing their own books?
I would, realize, I only have one book under my belt, so I'm still a neophyte when it comes to writing, but I also teach. I've been teaching college courses online at Norfolk State University for the past 10 years, and I teach teacher education courses. So I have quite a few of my students who want to write about their experiences just growing up and education in general. So I try to help them out with at least starting the writing process.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ameen, for being here. Are there any questions in the audience? No?
So this is your time. Yes, we have.
I have a question for Dr. Ameen. I read your book. It was wonderful, and I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you.
I'd like, the one thing, you mentioned that your brother did not go to a historically black college or university, but you and your sister did. And I wonder if you could expand a little on the differences in your 2 college experiences.
Sure. I have an older sister, and she went to Johnson C. Smith, which is a small historically black college in North Carolina. And my brother went to a historically white college, Westchester State University. His class was the first class that they admitted African American students. And so my brother dealt with a lot of racism on campus, where my sister and I, we were embraced by our community, and it was a loving environment. And we would come home and we would tell our brother about it, and he was just distraught about the whole college experience. And he said his professors were racist, and the town was racist, and students were racist, and he was hating life. And he said if he had to do it all over again, he would have gone to a historically black college. And out of my 3 siblings, he's the only one that didn't graduate from college. He dropped out his sophomore year, and he is the most revolutionary out of all of my family members. I mean, he is so pro-black, it's scary. That, and a lot of that is that it's a reaction to the racism he had to deal with. So I always tell individuals that, you know, if you want to learn more about your culture, it's always good to go to a school that will foster that. I tell my Hispanic students there are quite a few schools that may not be 100% Hispanic, but like Arizona State, California State, have over 60% of the population that go to school there are Hispanic. And sometimes it's just good to be around people who look like you, who come from your same culture, who maybe speak the language that you speak, and you just feel more comfortable. And it could make the college experience, which is difficult enough, a lot easier.
We have another question up here. Yes, go ahead, ask your question.
Hey, Julia.
Hi. Can you share one of your favorite anecdotes from the book?
All right, so probably the one that I could think about is at my school they would have a pool party. So in the gymnasium that they would invite freshmen, our first year there, to go to the pool in the gym, and they would play music on the side, and you would just have fun in the water, and it was co-ed. I'm your typical African American that I don't know how to swim. So most of the fun that was happening at the pool party was at the deep end. So if it was at the shallow end, I would have gone in, but it was at the deep end. So me and probably 10 of my friends who also didn't know how to swim, we stayed in the bleachers, and while the kids were in the water having fun, listening to music, we were just in the bleachers, just, you know, making fun of them, just, you know, telling all kind of jokes. But deep down, the joke was on us because they were having fun and we were just sitting in the bleachers.
Thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Ameen,
you.
for
Thank you,
coming.
everyone. I appreciate you coming out.